Stage 1 marks the beginning of the future Pyro main's adventure. They tried out a couple of other classes with little success, and heard that Pyro is a good class for new players, so after dying to them one too many times, they switched to Pyro and they think they're ready to go. Unfortunately, Stage 1 Pyros are usually just cannon fodder, and they haven't figured out how to use their Flamethrower beyond just W plus M1. If they somehow manage to get near an enemy, they're shocked to see that their Flamethrower doesn't instantly melt the enemy like they expected. This leads to their teams getting a little bit annoyed at them. Trash. But nevertheless, they quickly move on to Stage 2. Stage 2 represents the Pyro player's struggle to actually reach the enemies before getting picked off. They try to achieve this by playing ultra aggressive, not caring about their life or health in any way, and being blissfully unaware of enemies and allies around them. The future Pyro main either doesn't know what Airblast does yet, or used it by accident and thought it was a glitch. Whatever the case, the Pyro is still desperately trying to get in range of the enemies, but it seems like the entire enemy team is out to get them. They run in and die to a sentry, respawn and then die to a sniper, then they die to a heavy, a scout, a spy backstab, a soldier rocket, a demo man, an engineer hiding around the corner with a frontier justice crit. It just never stops, but eventually they do manage to reach the enemies and light them on fire, and they might even take a few of them out. This small victory inspires them to keep going, since they're still enjoying their class, and slowly improving each time they respawn. After suffering on Pyro for a few maps, the Stage 3 Pyro now has one sole purpose in TF2, light as many enemies on fire as possible with W plus M1 before going down. They find success on maps with tight corridors like Dust Bowl, and they actively seek out these maps to get easier kills and to avoid learning how to deal with annoying classes like scouts, engineers, snipers, demomen and heavies. Because almost all of their kills are with W plus M1, they start to take a little bit of pride in being called a W plus M1 shitter by the enemy team. By now, the Pyros realise that flames are great against spies, and although they don't actively spy check, if they see an enemy spy, then the Pyro is going to chase them down to the ends of the earth. At some point, the Stage 3 Pyro will start experimenting with a range of different weapons and loadouts. They don't really see the point of the degreaser, rarely using the airblast and never pulling off combos, at least not deliberately. They love the backburner and they think it's a straight upgrade to the stock Flamethrower, since they don't use airblast anyway. They saw an enemy Pyro decimate their team with a Phlogistinator yesterday, and saw other players complaining about how broken it is. They tried it out and think it's an upgrade, but they almost never live long enough to build up the crit meter, or use the crits effectively. If they actually manage to use their crits, it tends to go horribly wrong.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
They tried out the flare gun, but they can't aim it yet, and they think it's way too hard to use. They tried out the detonator, but they don't realise they can self-detonate the flare, and they blew themselves up when they tried to jump with it. They tried out a couple of the shotguns, but they eventually gravitated towards a scorch shot instead, because it's fun, easy to use, and it makes them feel a lot more useful. They also tried out the thermal thruster, but can't quite get it to work properly, and they tend to jetpack way too aggressively into entire groups of enemies. In the end, the beginner Pyro player usually just ends up using the Flamethrower and the scorch shot, since they're easy and fun to use. Pyro player also picked up a few mismatched Pyro cosmetics and looks hilarious, but they haven't got a favourite loadout just yet. At Stage 4, the Pyro player has started to naturally develop their game sense and awareness. They're staying alive longer, taking out spies every now and then, and generally being more useful to the team. By now, the Pyro main has tried out a few different weapons and usually settles on either a very selfish loadout with the back scratcher and scorch shot, or a very unselfish loadout like the home wrecker and the man melter. Whatever the case, the Stage 4 Pyro mainly sticks to a very specific playstyle and loadout, and still finds it kind of hard to play fluidly and change their playstyle on the fly. The Pyro main is enjoying the class overall, and they're just now starting to learn how airblasts and reflex work. They accidentally killed a soldier with a reflected rocket, and now they're obsessed with doing it again, so they try to use the airblast wherever possible, pushing enemies around and reflecting projectiles without much thought. The Stage 4 Pyro is also realising that playing with medics is a great way to support their W plus M1 playstyle, and it's at this point that there's a major divergence in the path of the Pyro main. The Pyro main has been W plus M1ing for a while now, and has gotten pretty good at it, but they also know that the airblast is great for helping your team, despite not being that good at using it just yet. Some Pyro players start to improve their airblast and reflex, but other Pyros decide that airblasting is too hard, too annoying, or just not worth the effort. And it's right here where a Pyro main can truly turn to the dark side. Some Pyros skip the stage, some stay in it for 5 hours, and some stay in it for 500. They equip the Phlogistinator and the Scorch Shot, build up their crits and taunt, and it begins. The dopamine rush is just too much and they keep going back for more. The Home Wrecker and Flamethrower are now just gathering dust in their backpacks. The Pyro main turns into something hideous. They now exclusively use a Phlogistinator, even befriending a Pocket Medic and terrorizing casual servers with hyper-aggressive crits and vaccinator Ubers. When their Pocket Medic friend isn't online, they die over and over, since they're now stuck in the bad habit of farming crits and then dive bombing into the enemy team. Any feeble attempts to use other Pyro flamethrowers results in failure, and the Pyro main simply continues playing with this Phlogistinator W+M1 style, sinking further into depravity and slowly losing their soul. Eventually, the Phlogistinator Pyro main inevitably gets bored of the class and stops playing it altogether, or fully commits to trying other weapons and finally moves on to Stage 6. After ignoring the temptations of the Phlogistinator, Pyros in Stage 6 are actually starting to get pretty good. They're enjoying the class, dying less, becoming much more useful to the team, and starting to get more consistent with their air blast. They reflected an enemy Huntsman arrow and rockets from a level 3 sentry recently, and now they're obsessed with doing it again. Just like in Stage 4, the intermediate Pyros will start challenging direct hit soldiers, lock and load demo men, and Huntsman snipers, and they're getting surprisingly close to pulling off these reflex, but they're still having trouble with a super fast, close range reflex. Stage 6 Pyro mains have usually tried out most of the available weapons and might even be able to fluidly switch between offense, defense and support duties. They've got respectable game sense and mechanics, but they can't quite pull off the more advanced Pyro strategies and techniques just yet. For example, Stage 6 Pyros who use the back burner can sometimes flank enemies and get some fun crit kills, but they still aren't great at consistently pulling off these flanks. They've tried using the degreaser and attempted some combos after watching YouTube clips, but they prefer to stock Flamethrower. They can do very basic jumps with the detonator, and they're comfortable finishing off enemies with a shotgun or panic attack, subconsciously realising that their aim is actually not that awful anymore. They use the Home Wrecker to help out engineers, and they're much more aware of enemy spies, taking the time to spy check around points of interest like friendly engineer sentries and medics. At this point, the Pyro main has probably picked up some more cosmetics as well as strange weapons, and they have a tendency to gravitate towards either cute loadouts or batshit crazy loadouts. In any case, these Pyro players are consistently useful to their teammates. Now in Stage 7, the Pyro main is still enjoying the class, but is kind of getting bored with the limited and one-dimensional playstyle of the Phlogistinator and a stock Flamethrower. They're also getting a bit annoyed with enemies who keep making fun of their W+M1, so they start experimenting with more advanced weapons and strategies. They try using harder weapons like the Dragon's Fury and the Flare Gun, and they also watch and subscribe to YouTubers like Christiana, Mixon, Lister, and yours truly, trying to recreate their Pyro frags with little success. By now, some Pyro mains might have tried out Pyro in more competitive environments like Uncletopia servers or even TF2 Highlander, as they frequently perform well in casual games. They have a good grasp of the pros, cons and limits of Pyro as a jack-of-all-trades class, and they start wanting to test those limits. Stage 7 Pyro mains tend to try more exciting and challenging playstyles like flank Pyro and offensive Pyro, instead of just spy checking and defending engineers and medics. In time, the Pyro main improves and moves on to Stage 8. After many hours of playing Pyro, Stage 8 Pyro mains feel like they've played with every weapon and every playstyle that the class has to offer. They're a force to be reckoned with as they've got pretty good game sense and can reflect projectiles fairly consistently now. They've got a couple of favourite playstyles and weapon loadouts that they're skilled with, but after playing the class for so long, they're starting to get a little bit burnt out and try harder and more outlandish Pyro playstyles like Combo Pyro and Pyro Shark to try and keep their Pyro experience fresh. They might try out other classes like Spy, Engineer or Heavy, and they might even try out different TF2 style games like Overwatch, but nothing really feels just like Pyro. Most players take a break from the class here before switching to a different class or even a different game, but for those Pyro players who just can't stay away from the class, Stage 9 awaits them. In Stage 9, the player has returned to playing Pyro again after trying out other games and other classes, and finally feels satisfied with his future as a Pyro main. They now have a great grasp on how to play Pyro effectively, but their goals have changed a bit since the earlier stages. Pyro mains in Stage 9 now try to look for wild and insane frags, focusing mainly on having fun on Pyro instead of playing it perfectly, but they can always switch back to a very competent and effective support Pyro playstyle if needed. They start experimenting with advanced Pyro combos and strategies like the Thermal Thruster glitch, map-specific detonator jumps, extinguisher crit combos, and reflect jumps. Some Pyro mains in this stage might be on a good competitive Highlander team as Pyro, or as an off-class like Spy, Scout or Engineer, after growing bored with the competitive Pyro playstyle, which mainly consists of spy checking, reflecting spam and repelling enemy Ubers, or hiding from the enemy sniper. Stage 9 Pyro mains rarely die to projectile weapons and have all but mastered the air blast, using it to move enemies around with some precision and completely shut down any beginner soldiers or demo men. When their normal Pyro play isn't working, they can summon a pocket medic from their friends list and unleash a server clearing Phlogistonator and Vaccinator combo. At this point, most Pyro mains tend to own professional killstreak weapons, Australian weapons, and they now have a favourite loadout for Pyro with unusuals, warpaints and strangers. The vast majority of Pyro players in Stage 9 are content with staying here, simply enjoying the game and messing around on their favourite class, but a select few go beyond and reach the final stage. In Stage 10, the Pyro main has become a true master of the class after playing Pyro for an extreme amount of time. Their game sense, aim, mechanics, and overall game knowledge is extremely high, and they can seamlessly switch between any Pyro playstyle or Pyro weapon, even going as far to develop their own unique playstyles and weapon interactions. Although these Pyro mains are menaces to the enemy team, they're still prone to burning out, so they tend to switch their playstyle and load out regularly to keep the game fresh. One of the ways they combat this burnout is by frequenting servers with tight-knit communities like Furry Pound, Fragmasters 24/7, and Oprah's Petrol Station. If an enemy is ever unlucky enough to play against a Stage 10 Pyro, then they have a truly unpleasant experience. Enemy soldiers and demomen hate the Pyro Master, as he seems almost invincible against projectile weapons, frequently reflecting fast projectiles like Huntsman arrows, direct hit rockets and Dragon's Fury fireballs. The Pyro Master can also perform advanced moves like reflect jumps and detonator extinguisher combos without any warning, making him dangerous and unpredictable to play against. To make matters even worse, friendly medics tend to naturally pocket the Pyro main and transform it into a nearly unstoppable force with Vaccinator and Medigun Ubers. After many hours of playing Pyro, these select few players have finally mastered the class and are at peace with their place as a Pyro Master.